The camera explodes into light and chatter, the hum of a broadcast studio swelling into the roar of a virtual crowd. A man's laughter slices through it, that sharp, self-amused cackle that turns disagreement into theater. His voice, Mark Levin's, rings out in crisp derision, mocking not policy or principle, but the very credential that crowned his target's hard-won journey. Across millions of screens, the line reverberates, a jeer disguised as wit. For a moment, the digital world freezes. Then it erupts. Comment sections ignite, emojis stream like tracer fire, and snippets of disbelief flood the timeline. Did he really say that? She's got a law degree, how dare he? Outrage has a rhythm of its own, quick and hot, and it surges through every corner of the feed. In the montage that follows, faces flicker, students watching in break rooms, parents shaking their heads, young professionals tightening their jaws as if the insult was aimed at them too. The laughter isn't just his anymore, it's a rolling echo of every time someone's expertise was mocked by a louder voice. A narrator's tone lowers, steady and grave. He thought he was scoring a joke. But he was lighting a fuse. We drift briefly through Crockett's still image on split screen, her expression unreadable, eyes steady, lips pressed, breathing the calm of someone who's felt this storm before. Behind that silence lies the weight of every degree paid for in sleepless nights, every courtroom where she fought to be heard, every headline that framed confidence as attitude. The music tightens, a single, suspenseful note that promises reckoning. Viewers lean closer. Somewhere, Levin continues chuckling into his microphone, relishing his own theater. But his echo is already being rewritten by the public he tried to entertain. They're no longer laughing with him, they're waiting for her. One voice online sums it up: if she answers, watch out, they're not ready. The tempo drops. The screen dims to black except for the captioned heartbeat of 3 words, her turn next. And just as the laughter fades, the narrator returns, soft but electric with certainty. But as the laughter echoed, one woman was already loading her verbal cannon. In the aftermath of that laugh, the story fractures into 2 Americas. On one side, a seasoned broadcaster, Mark Levin, holds court behind the comfort of a microphone, his voice booming as if each syllable were a verdict. He's spent decades mastering the art of the takedown, sculpting outrage into entertainment. To his audience, sarcasm is currency, derision equals dominance. Levin's style has always been a kind of verbal combat sport, where interruption is applause and volume masquerades as virtue. To critics, though, it's performance without accountability, a carnival of contempt that feeds the algorithm more than the mind. Every barb pulls ratings, every sneer feeds the cycle. He knows exactly which nerves to hit, and in that fateful broadcast, he pressed one that jolted the nation. But this wasn't just another pundit's punchline. Because sitting across the divide was someone cut from an entirely different cloth. Jasmine Crockett, lawyer, legislator, community advocate, embodies the ladder she climbed. Before Congress, it was courtrooms with flickering fluorescent lights and clients who counted on her voice to level the scales. She didn't inherit the spotlight, she earned it file by file, argument by argument. Her law degree wasn't decoration, it was armor forged through struggle. The contrast forms itself like a split screen, one man's laughter born of entitlement, one woman's silence built from resilience. Between them, a nation divided over what it chooses to admire, the volume of certainty or the substance of proof. The commentator mocks education, the congresswoman carries it. It's intellect versus arrogance, progress versus the comfort of caricatures. Narration slows, almost confidential. This wasn't just Levin versus Crockett. It was every boardroom, studio, and debate stage where credentials were treated like punchlines and expertise was shrugged off as elitism. The music underlines that unease. People feel it. Viewers who studied hard, who learned English in night classes, who sent children to college as the ultimate revenge against being underestimated. Crockett, for them, becomes a stand-in, a protector of dignity against the cheap applause of mockery. As the clip keeps circulating, think pieces sprout. Analysts argue about tone, decorum, the softening of discourse. But under that noise beats a deeper heartbeat. What happens to a country when the educated are mocked for caring too much about not sounding ignorant? When knowledge itself becomes suspicious? It's a debate older than any talk show. What is America's truest strength, shouting or understanding? Cut back to Levin. He's still certain. His studio lights gleam off polished notes. The grin hasn't dimmed. He believes the moment has passed, another routine bit of bluster destined to vanish by tomorrow's cycle. What he doesn't know is that tomorrow belongs to her. Out there, in living rooms and scrolling feeds, eyes narrow. There's a smell in the air, not anger exactly, but anticipation, the thick electric charge before a storm. They've seen politicians stumble through outrage before, but this one feels different. Crockett represents something too many forgot to expect from Congress, Poise under fire, intellect wielded like justice. The narration tightens its grip, every insult builds pressure. Every dismissal stacks another brick under the word enough. The audience senses what's coming, even if Levin doesn't. Then, a final image, her hand hovering near the microphone, not trembling, simply waiting for the right beat. Because this time, she isn't responding out of fury, she's answering history. Viewers thought they'd seen every kind of political argument, until Jasmine decided to reply. Long before the mocking laugh broke loose, Mark Levin's voice had already become an institution. For decades, commuters had driven home to his thunder. That voice, part courtroom cross-examination, part carnival barker, turned AM dials into arenas. He branded himself a protector of the Constitution, a crusader for the truth as he defined it, the man who'd expose intellectual weakness wherever it dared to breathe. His listeners adored the conviction, they called him fearless. His critics called him combustible. Radio was his kingdom, a space where the cadence of outrage transformed into confidence, where silence felt like surrender. To understand Levin is to understand the alchemy of talk radio itself, outrage as empathy twisted inside out. He could pivot from quoting Madison to mocking a rival's credentials in a single breath. 1 minute, he promised fidelity to founding principles. The next, he weaponized scorn like a rhetorical flamethrower. Early fans remember his rise during the post-Reagan years, when conservative talk became not just commentary but identity. He spoke to people who felt unheard, promising to translate anger into action. Yet as his audience expanded, so did the theater. The subjects changed, the tone hardened, and Levin's gift for weaving insult with ideology became his signature. He delighted in the rhythm of humiliation, the gotcha moment, the verbal trap sprung live for applause lines that no one in the room could hear but everyone online could feel. He saw opponents not as interlocutors but foils. Each new adversary presented a fresh opportunity to perform certainty, to prove that the loudest conviction was the purest truth. His headset became a crown, his studio, an empire of echo. When critics accused him of poisoning dialogue, he countered that passion isn't poison, it's patriotism. But somewhere in that alchemy, humility evaporated. Contradiction stalked every broadcast. He invoked constitutional rigor yet dismissed anyone trained in law who challenged him. He praised the founder's intellect but mocked modern thinkers who mirrored that very depth. It wasn't hypocrisy he heard, it was dominance. For Levin, contradiction wasn't a flaw, it was a weapon that kept adversaries dizzy. If logic cornered him, volume could free him. Imagine the rhythm of a typical show, the rustle of papers, a deep inhalation, then the signature growl rising from his chest. Producers knew the pattern. The spike in decibels signaled a coming rant, and rants brought ratings. Each outburst minted headlines that fed back into the loop. He'd cut through nuance like a machete through vines, narrating the world as a contest between fools and patriots, with himself secure on the righteous side of the line. Still, even his colleagues knew the risk of that performance. To stay king of outrage, you must always find a next target. When ordinary opponents lost power to rile his audience, he sought bigger game. That's how the setup began, with one offhand segment about a rising Democratic congresswoman from Texas who'd made waves in committee hearings. To Levin, she was a new antagonist, one worthy of a weekend meltdown.
A law degree? Perfect fodder.
Another so-called expert, he framed it, tapping the desk for emphasis. Inside the studio, the crew exchanged uneasy looks. They'd seen this film before, first the smirk, then the deliberate misquote, then the sound of Levin's voice stretching into theater. He mocked her credentials, adopting an exaggerated incredulity that felt more personal than political. The laughter that followed wasn't just his, it was the laughter of a crowd conditioned to enjoy ridicule as revelation. Across his social feeds, loyal fans relayed clips with gleeful comments, digital applause echoing in real time. Levin scrolled through them between takes, satisfaction flickering like stage light. To him, this was proof of relevance. He still had the power to dominate a weekend news cycle with a sentence. But in the wider world, something shifted. Outsiders seeing the clip didn't hear political commentary. They heard contempt, a sneer aimed downward at the very idea that a woman, a black congresswoman no less, could own her intellect as boldly as any man behind a mic. The more he doubled down, defending the joke, the colder the applause became. Humor turned brittle when exposed to daylight. The empire of echo began to sound hollow. Yet Levin couldn't sense the tremor. For men accustomed to being the loudest in the room, silence from others doesn't read as danger, it reads as victory. So when his own laugh filled the studio, he saw it as proof that he'd scored once again, that another liberal snowflake was melting somewhere under his commentary. He didn't realize it yet, but those waves of laughter carried the weight of irony waiting to collapse on him. Because as his audience shared that clip, they unknowingly widened his stage beyond familiar territory, into circles ready not to laugh, but to listen. Among them was Jasmine Crockett herself, silent, calculating, already composing a response that would travel farther and hit deeper than he ever expected. And so, while the king of the airwaves celebrated another performance, somewhere a different kind of power, steady, quiet, grounded in intellect, was gathering momentum. The moment of mockery had already started to turn into legend, only not the legend he imagined. But by mocking her degree, he had accidentally set the stage for his most public undoing yet. Before the exchange became a trending clip, Jasmine Crockett's story was already a series of uphill climbs stitched together by persistence. Her calm on screen that day didn't come from luck or spin. It came from miles walked through Texas heat, behind courthouse doors, through classrooms where she had to prove twice what others were given once. She grew up believing the law wasn't some abstract code but a living promise, often broken, sometimes kept, always worth fighting for. In high school, she watched neighbors harassed for how they looked, for where they prayed, for being poor in the wrong zip code. Those moments didn't just ignite ambition, they carved purpose. She decided she wouldn't just argue about fairness, she'd master the language that could demand it. Law school wasn't the glamorous montage that television sells. It was fluorescent lights and cold sandwiches at 2 a.m., reading case law until the words blurred. It was sitting in classrooms where voices like hers were absent, and making peace with the discomfort of being the proof that presence matters. When others coasted, she revised. When nerves scattered across exam pages, she wrote through the rising panic. That degree Levin would one day mock was inked not just with her name, but with every all-nighter and every whispered doubt she refused to accept as truth. As a young attorney, she didn't chase lucrative firms or mahogany offices. She opened files no one else wanted, cases defending people accused but unseen, clients whose futures depended on someone who still believed the system could listen. She learned early that justice doesn't arrive polished, it arrives contested, bruised, and worth saving. In court, she found her rhythm, measured, articulate, firm without aggression. Bailiffs noticed, judges leaned forward when she spoke. The work tested her constantly. She saw victories swallowed by prejudice, evidence ignored, legislation written in permanent ink but applied in disappearing ink. Yet she refused cynicism. Every loss, she told herself, was tuition for a deeper education, the kind no degree could grant. She carried those lessons into activism, where she fought voter suppression and educational inequity, molding herself into a bridge between streets that marched and institutions that preferred quiet. When the chance came to run for office, she hesitated. Politics wasn't her dream, service was. But she realized her courtroom principles needed a bigger stage. Door-knocking through rain, she met grandmothers who pressed her hand and whispered that her victory would mean theirs. Single parents opened doors halfway, wary until they recognized sincerity rather than slogan. She promised not perfection but presence, that she'd show up.
And she did.
Enough voters believed her to carry her name to Washington. In Congress, she learned a new kind of courtroom, one where the gavel sometimes felt ornamental, where interruptions were strategy, and where dignity had to be defended second by second. Yet even amid televised chaos, she never lost that trial lawyer's discipline, to listen fully before responding, to weigh words like evidence. Viewers noticed. Her colleagues did too. They labeled her sharp. Some said too sharp, as though clarity were aggression. She smiled through it all, knowing the double standards were as old as politics itself. The night before the clash with Levin, she'd spent hours reviewing constituent letters about housing and school lunches. When staffers mentioned the commentator's latest jab, she shrugged. She had no interest in online skirmishes. But as clips multiplied and the tone darkened, she sensed a familiar tension in the air. The same disbelief that followed her since the first courtroom, the same question, does she really belong here? That's why the insult struck so deep, not as personal humiliation, but as a spark in a long lineage of dismissal. For countless women, especially women of color, credentials don't shield, they challenge. Each accomplishment dares someone like Levin to minimize it. Yet Crockett's secret resilience was a refusal to translate mockery into rage. She knew that rage burns hot and fast, control burns steady and enduring. The calm scene later wasn't detachment, it was discipline. Behind that poised expression lay a catalogue of every slight repurposed into motivation, every underestimated moment melted down into armor. The very traits that infuriated her detractors, her composure, her command, her unwillingness to shout back, were the tools she'd forged precisely for moments like this. Contrast her now with Levin's theatrical certainty. He wields bombast like a banner, she treats words as instruments of precision. He thrives on chaos, she engineers stillness. In the pitched battle of tone and volume, she becomes the quiet that unnerves. Audiences who learn her story later, immigrant families, first-generation students, idealists balancing exhaustion and faith, find a mirror in her trajectory. She isn't just a politician, she's proof that resilience can don a suit and walk into halls once off limits. For them, her eventual clapback will feel less like entertainment and more like restoration. Her law degree, the one dismissed as a punchline, represents every frontier once declared unreachable. It is the symbol of merit meeting mockery and refusing to bow. And that's why, in the seconds before her response, when cameras swivel and commentators sharpen scripts, her expression doesn't flicker with anger. It glows with something rarer, a certainty that intellect grounded in service is bulletproof. She's been underestimated her entire career, and each time the world hands her condescension, she turns it into composure. The next moment will be no different. And when the cameras rolled again, she carried not anger, but purpose. The day of confrontation unfolds like a broadcast scored for suspense. Screens glow in living rooms and phones across the country, each one tuned to the familiar theater of talking heads. The segment begins innocuously, topics of policy and procedure, the usual debate choreography. But under it all hums a tension felt even through Wi-Fi, that tremor of inevitability when two opposing forces are about to share the same frame. Levin is already warming up, prowling through sentences, voice rolling from sarcasm to sermon. Every pause is bait, every chuckle a challenge. He repeats the mockery that had set the internet alight, this time with added flourish, milking the moment for audience reaction. The microphone catches his laugh, it echoes metallic, overconfident, as if the sound itself was proof of victory.
Crockett listens.
Her posture is stillness carved from discipline. The camera captures the smallest motion, her inhale, the flicker of awareness in her eyes, the mind calculating what the facts demand and the dignity allows. She knows millions are watching, some praying she explodes, others hoping she eclipses him with composure.
She keeps them waiting.
Levin senses the anticipation and mistakes it for control. He doubles down, stringing together barbs about real lawyers and media darlings who forgot the Constitution. His tone sharpens like a gavel slammed off beat. The moderators shift uncomfortably, caught between performance and peril. Journalists start typing live reactions before the conversation is even over, the click of keyboards a nervous metronome. The tension becomes physical. Viewers lean forward unknowingly, their hearts sinking with the rising tempo. On social media, watch parties spin in real time, hashtags preparing themselves, memes half-formed. Supporters plead through screens, "Don't let him get to you." Detractors smirk, sensing blood in the water. Somewhere, a producer whispers, "Stay tight on her face, this is the shot." Crockett's stillness remains unbroken. That composure isn't silence, it's gathering. Inside, she's replaying every time arrogance tried to drown reason, every case where she had to wait for her turn to rectify distortion. Experience has taught her that the longer she waits, the more certain her words become. And that certainty terrifies men who equate volume with intellect. Levin continues, unaware that his rhythm is faltering, that confidence curdles fastest in proximity to calm. His laughter grows brittle, the timing off. What was earlier amusement now sounds defensive. He notices, but too late, that the camera has shifted subtly away from him. The lens belongs to her now. The air in the room thickens. One network commentator later describes it as the pause before lightning strikes. No one interrupts, even the studio monitors seem to mute themselves. Across the internet, streams buffer from sheer traffic, everyone waiting for the next sentence, expecting maybe a counterpunch, maybe a walkout. But Crockett simply breathes. The movement barely registers, yet it resets the atmosphere. The adrenaline of those watching morphs into a reverent silence. She glances down briefly, not to consult notes but to recalibrate integrity. When she looks up again, her gaze fixes on Levin, not angry, not trembling, but precise, like a laser finding its coordinates. That's when the narrative tips. The energy that powered his dominance begins to reverse polarity, its charge now belongs to her. The audience doesn't yet know it, but the pendulum has started its swing. Levin, still talking, feels the invisible shift, the way eyes stop following him. He laughs again, louder this time, trying to reclaim sound as authority. Yet that laugh rings hollow, a drum-seeking echo in a room that has turned skeptic. Outside the studio, commentators on rival networks sense what's happening.
"Watch her," someone murmurs off camera.
She's waiting for the perfect second. Timing in live debate is everything. Crockett's instinct has always been immaculate. Every frame tightens the coil. The sound of the clock counts down somewhere, a symbolic heartbeat aligning with a nation's breath. Viewers who once prayed she'd keep composure now crave her comeback. Even those indifferent to politics feel a primal curiosity. They know theatrical balance demands a reversal, that every taunt begs an answer. And so the noise settles into expectation. Levin's words trail into half-sentences. The moderator's pupils widen, unsure whether to intervene or record history. Across timelines, someone types, "She's about to do it."
Then Crockett moves.
Not abruptly, but deliberately. A slight lean forward, a hand adjusting the microphone like a sword returned to grip. The whispering in the control room stops, replaced by static anticipation. Every screen in America holds its breath. Then she leaned toward the microphone, and history hit record. The second she leans in, the energy in the studio changes pitch. No blaring music, no overt cue, just the collective hush of expectation reeling itself tight. The timbre of her voice when it arrives is nothing like Levin's steel or swagger. It's controlled oxygen, a tone that fills rather than scorches, measured so precisely that listeners instinctively lower their own volume. "Mr. Levin," she begins evenly, "there's a difference between talking about the law and knowing how it works." That single sentence hits like flint against stone. Sparks illuminate the faces on set, stunned moderators, producers blinking between cue cards, Levin momentarily frozen mid-smirk.
She doesn't rush.
She lets silence stretch, 3 beats long enough for the gravity to settle. When she speaks again, the rhythm is courtroom deliberate. She takes his mockery, his claim that her degree is mere paper, and builds a ladder out of it. "People like me," she says, "weren't supposed to be lawyers. We were expected to listen while others explained the rules. But some of us learned the rules so well, we could finally correct the games you've been playing." The room exhales, collectively. Not applause yet, just awe. Her words don't shout back, they surgically invert the insult. You can almost hear viewers online mutter, "There it is." Levin stirs, attempting a chuckle, but it falters. He taps his notes, hunting for retort. Crockett continues, unhurried. "When you mock education," she says, "you mock every parent who worked 3 jobs so their child could read those laws you claim to defend." Her eyes hold steady on him now, not defiant, simply factual.
"I didn't buy my degree with hot air.
I earned it with discipline, the very thing missing from this conversation." A low sound ripples through the studio, not boos, not cheers, just that gasp reserved for moments when decorum meets precision. The camera shifts to Levin's face. The confident set of his jaw melts into something wary, almost human. For the first time, he seems aware of the optics, the split screen no longer favoring his dominance. The performance armor starts to crack. Crockett advances her argument seamlessly, pivoting from personal insult to systemic symbolism. "This isn't about me," she continues. "It's about the belief that wisdom comes dressed a certain way, male, loud, dismissive. But my community taught me another kind of wisdom, listening first, speaking with purpose, and never confusing volume with value." Each clause feels honed on an anvil. The narrator, unseen, could almost whisper through the moment. Her words land like a gavel in a courtroom of noise. Viewers sense it. This is no viral quip, it's a precedent being set in real time. By now, the chat threads have erupted. Emojis rain like confetti. Subtitles of her quotes start circulating before she's even finished. Journalists type faster, knowing they're witnessing a shift from scandal to statement. Levin forces another interjection. "Spare us the sermon," he mutters, half laughing, voice cracking under its own impatience. But his defense only advertises surrender. The interruption gives her chance to deliver the coup de grace. "Sir," she replies, calm as sunrise, "it's not a sermon. It's a reminder. That mic you use to mock people, it's a public trust. And tonight, that trust just clocked your arrogance in real time."
The audience breaks. Applause now, uneven, startled, honest.
Some clap in disbelief, others in joy at seeing civility wield like power. The sound pushes Levin back in his chair. His reply fades into confusion, half words about free speech, the tempo of a man realizing he's lost the rhythm of his own show. Crockett seizes closure without ever looking triumphant. Her voice dips lower, each phrase like a closing statement.
"I respect debate," she says.
"But respect requires truth. And truth deserves more than mockery, it demands courage. That degree you joked about? It's the reason I can stand here and remind you, ignorance wrapped in confidence is still ignorance." Silence follows, pure, ringing silence. Even cameras seem to hold their breath. Then comes the smallest sound, Levin's nervous shuffle, papers rustling as if searching for a page that restores control.
None appears.
The narrator's voice overlays the lingering quiet. For one long moment, arrogance discovered gravity. Crockett straightens, adjusting her microphone with the same deliberate motion that began this scene. "We're done here," she says gently, as if closing a chapter rather than slamming a door. That's when the applause roars fully, uncontained now. The studio trembles with it. Technicians exchange glances. Did that just happen on live broadcast? Someone somewhere tweets, she just turned condescension into curriculum. Within minutes, political analysts are already clipping the footage. Cut to montages. Levin stepping away from the desk, smile gone brittle. The control booth ablaze with messages from network executives. Social platforms exploding with side-by-side videos of his sneer and her composure. Hashtags multiply. Hashtag Crockett Clapback. Hashtag degrees of dignity. Hashtag knowledge wins. The phrase that began as ridicule mutates into rallying cry. Cinematically, the contrast tightens. Close UPS of faces reacting in delay, rewind loops of her expression at key syllables, slow-motion playback of Levin realizing he's no longer the protagonist. Commentators on rival channels replay her lines like quotes from a courtroom drama, labeling it the verbal mic drop heard across the aisle. But the most striking part isn't the spectacle, it's her restraint. Even as headlines explode, she doesn't gloat. To the camera's lingering lens, she simply offers a faint, professional smile that says more than triumph ever could. It's the smile of someone whose victory is rooted in ethos rather than ego. Levin's camp issues a half-hearted joke online, claiming he loves spirited debate, but no one's laughing. His followers try to spin it as taken out of context, yet the context is carved in digital stone, replayed millions of times, each repetition sharpening the contrast. Meanwhile, educators retweet her lines, civic leaders quote them, and young viewers find in her not just representation but permission, to remain calm when dismissed, to find eloquence where anger once lived. The ripple gain momentum, late-night shows reference it, pundits argue whether it's civics or spectacle. It's both, and that's why it lands. As the segment fades to commercial, the studio lights dim, leaving Levin staring at the blank monitor. The laughter that started the story has vanished into static. He clears his throat, murmurs something off mic, but the sound technician already has the volume down. Crockett gathers her notes, not hurried, not smug. She glances once toward him, gives a courteous nod as though acknowledging a worthy sparring partner who never truly showed up, then steps away. By the time she reaches the corridor, staffers are whispering, half thrilled, half stunned. A producer murmurs, that was surgical. Another says, she just changed the conversation. She doesn't answer, she keeps walking. Outside, night air meets pride, a quiet, cooling victory after heat. And somewhere inside the studio, Levin scrolls through notifications that read like verdicts. Each replay of her words chips another fraction off the myth of untouchability. The empire of echo has learned humility's frequency. But what followed online made that single clapback explode into a movement. The morning after felt electric. No official announcement, no breaking news banner, just the quiet buzz of an internet that had already chosen its hero.
Phones lit up before dawn.
By breakfast, timelines glowed under a single banner, hashtag Crockett Clapback. Clips multiplied faster than comment sections could keep up. On Twitter, now X, the video played in endless loops, first the insult, then the silence, then her steady voice cutting through it. Millions replayed those seconds the way people replay goals or game-winning shots. Memes bloomed overnight, Jasmine adjusting the microphone, captioned when patience graduates to power. Someone animated her quotes in superhero font, another remixed her words over triumphant music. Even late-night comics borrowed lines for monologues. And through it all ran the same astonishment, she didn't raise her voice once. Bipartisan reactions poured in, proof that the moment belonged to culture more than party. Progressive commentators framed it as a masterclass in dignity. Independents called it the kind of civility we forgot was possible. Even a handful of conservative voices admitted grudging respect, she made her point without shouting, can't really knock that. Others, predictably, criticized her tone, revealing exactly why her poise hit a nerve. The debate about the debate became its own echo chamber, yet every argument led back to her conduct. Whether adored or analyzed, she commanded attention. News outlets scrambled to join the wave. Morning shows rolled the tape repeatedly, emphasizing how calmly she pushed back. Analysts compared it to viral political moments of the last decade, each noting that this one felt different, less outrage concert, more paradigm shift. One anchor summarized it simply, it's the fight that became a lesson. Requests for interviews flooded her office inbox. Editorials dissected every gesture, the tilt of her head, the timing of her phrases. Linguists admired the structure of her rebuttal. Psychologists discussed why composure elicits more authority than aggression. Hashtag spawned submovements. Hashtag speak with grace. Hashtag calm is power. Hashtag degrees of dignity. Across community centers and classrooms, her response became inspiration material. Teachers played the clip to illustrate persuasive communication. Advocacy groups used it to campaign for respectful discourse. You could feel civic energy flicker to life in the comment threads, people admitting they felt proud, seen, even a little redeemed by witnessing intellect triumph without venom. Meanwhile, Levin's circle tried to staunch the bleeding. His next broadcast opened with deflection, but the internet had already decided its narrative. Attempts at humor rang flat. Someone spliced his new jokes beside her calm reply, and the juxtaposition turned every defense into confession. Within days, viewership analytics showed a dip in engagement. Audiences, it turned out, preferred dignity when they'd sampled it. Crockett, on the other hand, became a household presence beyond the political sphere. Online creators quoted her lines as motivational soundbites. A young immigrant student tweeted, "I used to think politics wasn't for people like me. Then I saw her." That post alone gathered 500,000 likes, a digital standing ovation from those who finally felt represented in power's vocabulary. Pride surged through communities that had long watched women, particularly women of color, dismissed on panels and podiums. Her victory felt shared. Neighborhood discussions that usually centered on cynicism now buzzed with excitement. People re-watched the clip with family members, pointing and saying, "That's how you do it," with calm. Even in Congress, her composure recalibrated expectations. Colleagues approached her in hallways, part admiration, part curiosity. "How did you stay so measured?" they asked. She smiled, grateful but wary, because she knew viral moments are fickle currency. They burn fast and vanish. Her focus was not trending, it was translating attention into substance. Editorial writers began connecting her poise to a wider pattern: how women in power must outperform in restraint to be granted basic respect. They argued her reaction didn't just silence one critic, it exposed the double standards suffocating public discourse. Suddenly, national conversation wasn't just about a feud, it was about how America treats intellect that isn't packaged in arrogance. The ripple effect was real. Universities invited her to speak about communication ethics. Civic podcasts dissected her tone between news recaps and sports highlights. Every mention transformed into validation for those exhausted by spectacle. The message circulating beneath the memes and applause was quieter but deeper. Comportment could still move culture. Some observers worried the hype would eclipse policy. But in countless homes, pride outweighed cynicism. Immigrant parents whispered to daughters, "See, dignity can still command a room." Young professionals adopted her phrases in meetings, channeling the balance she modeled. The emotional current of the nation tilted slightly back toward belief that grace was not weakness, that intellect still had applause left in it. And while networks obsessed over ratings and reaction counts, Crockett herself kept the noise at arm's length. She released a brief statement thanking viewers for supporting civil dialogue and mutual respect, then turned conversation back to real legislative work. No victory laps, no social media dancing, just the same precision she displayed at the microphone. That restraint became its own headline. Reporters called it the silence after the storm. Supporters called it wisdom. To them, her refusal to bask in vindication wasn't detachment, it was leadership in its purest form. Yet amid the viral storm, Jasmine refused to let victory turn into vanity. The storm has passed, but its echo lingers, in comment threads that have quieted into reflection, in classrooms still discussing composure, in the uneasy radio silence from a man once sure of his invincibility. What remains isn't the sting of insult, it's the shine of how Jasmine Crockett answered it. The clash was loud, but the aftermath hums with something rare in politics: respect. In the grand replay of American debates, mockery has always burned fast and bright. It fills the airwaves, wins fleeting applause, then dissolves into next week's outrage. But dignity endures. It's steady, cumulative, like sunlight rising after nights of noise. The audience that once craved spectacle found itself transfixed by the opposite, the calm authority of someone refusing to be dragged into performance. Narration turns thoughtful now, almost tender. What we witnessed wasn't simply a rebuttal, it was integrity under pressure, the kind that defines character long after fame fades. Her calm became its own statement of principle: the law as compass, intellect as armor, grace as force. She embodied what the nation quietly hopes to be: strong without cruelty, firm without vanity, fearless without shouting. The footage of that debate becomes symbolic montage: her measured eyes, his uncertain grin, the moment two versions of American confidence collided, one inherited, one earned. For viewers who've endured years of arguments that sound like shouting contests, that image is almost redemptive. It whispers that true power doesn't need to scream, truth carries its own microphone. Analysts later concluded that her calm resonated because it restored balance in a landscape overheated by bravado. But the meaning runs deeper. Crockett's poise connected to a universal American story: the pursuit of respect through perseverance. Every immigrant parent, every first-generation graduate, every citizen told to know their place saw in her the reaffirmation of a promise this country sometimes forgets to keep, that knowledge and dignity are the great equalizers. Even the language around her moment shifted. Headlines that once glamorized scandal now praised composure. Social feeds, usually dripping with sarcasm, filled with reflection. People quoted her not as a comeback artist, but as a standard-bearer. One viral caption summed it up: "In a time of noise, she gave us melody." The nation seemed hungry for that harmony. Meanwhile, Levin's moment faded as quickly as laughter in an empty hall. The ridicule he served became relic. History tends to archive arrogance under temporary. The camera that celebrated his smirk now immortalizes her silence instead. And therein lies the quiet inevitability of justice, not always through verdicts, but through memory. Crockett herself downplayed the symbolism. "It was just about respect," she said in one modest interview, gently steering conversation back to policy. Yet that humility only deepened admiration. She didn't treat the episode as a triumph to gloat over, rather as evidence that faith in discourse could still be rewarded. Cinematic imagery envelopes the narration, morning light pouring through the Capitol's windows, the echo of her footsteps down marble halls, staffers greeting her with nods of quiet recognition. Over this, the voiceover slows to reflection. She reminded us that decorum isn't dull, it's defiant. In an age that rewards the loudest, stillness itself becomes revolution. From courthouse dreams to congressional floors, her journey demonstrates a truth older than microphones: power revealed in the discipline to stay composed while others unravel. That grace doesn't just silence arrogance, it educates it. Viewers carry the lesson forward like a secret, that a steady gaze can disarm hostility faster than any slogan. Through it all, America relearns something about itself. The country that reveres independence and intellect sees both united in one poised figure. Dignity becomes the quiet anthem, replacing cynicism with conviction. Children in civics classes start essays with her quote. Professionals pin it above desks as a mantra for meetings and negotiations. Her response becomes shorthand for resilience done right. The narrator's tone swells with orchestral warmth, every sentence moving toward uplift. Because at its best, this nation celebrates courage in the mind and mercy in the tone. When those two meet, even mockery falls silent. In slow motion, the scene returns to that defining instant. Levin's laughter fading, Crockett's eyes unwavering, the nation catching its collective breath. Freeze there, mid-transition, arrogance collapsing into reflection, dignity standing unbowed. Because the real lesson wasn't what she said, it was how she carried herself after. From a laugh meant to belittle to a moment that redefined respect, the story comes full circle. A televised mockery became a masterclass in composure, a clash meant for spectacle matured into a mirror of what leadership can still look like. The title promised confrontation, but what it delivered was transformation. Mockery, silence, transcendence. The final narration plays softly over lingering images, the microphone now still, the studio lights cooling, Crockett walking away not as a victor in battle but as a keeper of principle. Her calm wasn't passive, it was proof that intellect can still bend noise toward meaning. In an age that rewards outrage, she turned restraint into rebellion, reason into rhythm, clarity into courage. This, the narrator says, is what power sounds like when it's earned. It doesn't overpower, it overcomes. It listens, calculates, answers once, and lets the truth do its own amplification. Screens fade through a collage of faces, students, parents, workers, all watching her final words and nodding as though reclaiming quiet pride. The voiceover gathers momentum. Share this story not because it's dramatic, but because it's directional. Speak wisely. Hold your ground. In a country as loud as ours, the strongest voice may well be the calmest one. The shot widens, Capitol silhouette against evening light, the flag breathing slow in the wind, orchestral strings rising. The narrator seals it, mockery passes. Integrity echoes. And tonight, America heard the echo. Fade to black beneath the closing title. Truth's quiet strength in a noisy era.